Merry little surge of electricity piped by automatic alarm from the mood organ beside his bed awakened Rick Deckard. Surprised it always surprised him to find himself awake without prior notice. He rose from the bed, stood up in his multicolored pajamas, and stretched. Now in her bed, his wife Irene opened her gray, unmerry eyes, blinked, then groaned and shut her eyes again. "You set your Penfield too weak," he said to her. "I'll reset it, and you'll wake, and—" "Keep your hands off my settings," her voice held bitter sharpness. "I don't want to be awake." He seated himself beside her, bent over, and explained softly, "If you set the surge up high, you'll be glad you're awake. That's the whole point. It's setting C. It overcomes threshold bearing consciousness. It does for me. Friendly, because he felt disposed towards the world. His setting had been at D. He patted her pale shoulder. "Get your crude cop's hands away from me," Ryan said. "I'm not a cop." He felt irritable, now, although he hadn't dialed for it. "You're worse," his wife said, her eyes still shut. "You're a murderer, hired by the cops." "I never killed a human being in my life." His irritability bruised now, and become outright hostility. Irene said, "Just those poor Andes. I notice you've never had any hesitation as to spending the bounty money I bring home on whatever momentarily attracts your attention." He rose, strode to the console of his mood organ. Instead of saving, said, "So we could buy a real sheep to replace the fake electric one upstairs? A mere electric animal, and me earnings all that I've worked my way up through the years." At his console, he hesitated between dialing for a thaumatic suppressant, which abolished his mood of rage, of thaumatic stimulant, which would make him irked enough to win the argument. "If you dial," Irene said, eyes open and watching for greater venom, "then I'll dial the same. I'll dial the maximum, and you'll see a fight that makes every argument we've had now seem like nothing. Dial and see, just try me." She rose swiftly, locked the console of her own mood organ, stood glaring at him, waiting. He sighed, defeated by her threat. "I'll dial what's on my schedule for today." Examining the schedule for January 3rd, 2021, he saw that a businesslike professional attitude was called for. "If I dial by schedule," he said warily, "will you agree to also?" he said, counting enough not to commit himself until his wife had agreed to follow suit. "My schedule for today lists a 6-hour accusatory depression," Irene said. "What? Why did you schedule that?" "It defeated the whole purpose of the mood organ. I didn't even know you could set it for that," he said gloomily. "I was sitting here one afternoon," Irene said, "and naturally I turned on Buster Friendly and his friendly friends. He was talking about big news items he was about to break, and then the awful commercial came on, the one I hate, for Mountain Bank lead, cod pieces. And so for a minute I shut off the sound. I heard this building, I heard she gestured, empty apartments," Rick said. Sometimes he heard them at night, then he was supposed to be asleep, and yet for this day, in age of one occupied a connect building, rated high in the scheme population density out in what had been before the war the suburbs, one could find buildings entirely empty, or so he had heard. He had let the information remain second-hand. Like most people, he did not care to experience it directly. At that moment, Arad said, "When I had the TV sound off, I was in a 382 mood. I had just dialed it, so although I had heard the emptiness intellectually, I didn't feel it. My first reaction consisted of being grateful, and we could afford a Penfield mood organ. But then I realized how unhealthy it was, something the absence of life, not just in this building, but everywhere, and not reacting. Do you see? I guess you don't, but that used to be considered a sign of mental illness. They called it absence of appropriate effect. So I left the TV sound off, and I sat down at the mood organ, and I experimented. I finally found a setting for despair." Her dark, pert face showed satisfaction as she had achieved something of worth, so I put on my schedule for twice a month. I think that's a reasonable amount of time to feel hopeless about everything, about staying here on Earth after everybody who's smart has immigrated, don't you think? "But a mood like that," Rick said, "you're apt to stay in it, not dial your way out. Despair like that about total reality is self-perpetuating." I programmed automatic resetting for 3 hours later. His wife sleekly, a 481, awareness of the manifold possibilities open to me in the future, new hope that I know 481, he uttered. He had dialed out the combination many times. He relied on it greatly. "Listen," he said, seating himself on his bed and taking hold of her hands to draw her down beside him. "Even with an automatic cutoff, it's dangerous to undergo a depression, any kind. Forget that you scheduled and I forget what I've scheduled. We'll dial a 104 together and both experience it, and then you stay in it while I reset mine for my usual business attitude. That way I'll want to hump up to the roof, check out the sheep, then head for the office. Meanwhile, I know you're not sitting here brooding with no TV. He released her slim long fingers, passed through the spacious apartment to the living room, which smelled faintly of last night's cigarettes. There he bent to turn on the TV. From the bedroom, Irene's voice came. I can't stand TV before breakfast. Dial 888, said as he sat warm, the desire to watch TV no matter what's on it. I don't feel like dialing anything at all now, Irene said. Then dial 3, he said. I can't dial something that stimulates my cerebral cortex without wanting to dial. If I don't want to dial, I don't want to dial, that most of all. Because then I want to dial, and wanting to dial right now is the most alien drive I can imagine. I just want to sit here on the bed, stare at the floor. Her voice had become sharp, with overtones of bleakness as her soul congealed and she ceased to move, as the instinctive, omnipresent film of great weight of an almost absolute inertia settled over her. He turned on the TV sound, and the voice of Buster Friendly boomed out and filled the room. Ho ho, folks, time now for a brief note on today's weather. The Mongoose Satellites reports that fallout will especially pronounce towards noon and will then taper off, so all you folks who will be venturing out, appearing beside him, her long nightgown trailing wispily, Iran shut the TV off. Okay, I give up. I'll dial anything you want me to. Ecstatic, sexual bliss, I feel so bad. I'll even endure that. What the hell, what difference does it make? I'll dial for both of us, Rick said, and he led her back into the bedroom. There at her console, he dialed 594. Pleased to acknowledge the husband's superior wisdom in all matters on his own console, he dialed for a creative and fresh attitude towards his job. Although this he hardly needed, such was his habitual innate approach without recourse to Penfield artificial brain stimulation. After a hurried breakfast, he had lost time due to the discussion with his wife. He ascended clad for venturing out, including his Ajax monomountebank lead codpiece to the covered roof pasture, whereof his electric sheet grazed, whereon in its sophisticated piece of hardware that it was, chomped away its simulated contentment, bamboozling the other tenants of the building. Of course, some of their animals undoubtedly consisted of electronic circuit fakes, too. He had, of course, never nosed in the matter any more than his neighbors had pried in the real workings of a sheep. Nothing could be more polite to say, "Is your sheep genuine?" would be a worse breach of manners than to inquire whether citizens' teeth, hair, genital organs would test out authentic. The morning air spilled over in the radioactive motes. Gray and sun beclouding belched about him, haunting his nose. He sniffed involuntarily the taint of death. Well, that was too strong a description for it, he sighed as he made his way to the particular plot of sod which he owned along with the unduly large apartment below. The legacy of the World War termites had diminished in potency. Those who could not survive the dust had passed in oblivion years ago, and the dust, weaker now, confronting the strong survivors, only deranged minds and genetic properties. Despite his lead codpiece, the dust undoubtedly filtered in and at him, brought him daily, so long as he failed to emigrate, its little load of befouling filth. So far, medical checkups taken monthly confirmed him as a regular, a man who could reproduce within the tolerances set by law. Any month, however, the exam by San Francisco Police Department doctors could reveal otherwise. Continually new species came into existence, created out of regulars by the omnipresent dust. The saying currently blabbed by posters, TV ads, and government junk mail: emigrate or degenerate. The choice is yours. Very true, Rick thought, as he opened the gate to his little pasture.